cup looks like it's from the 90s. Vanilla Coke Zero. Yeah, I know the vanilla flavoring cancels out the zero part. Shut up, nobody asked you. It's time for another Q&A. Is this on? I should check the mic first. That'd be a great first move. You guys posted your questions. I'm gonna try to answer them best I can. Here we go. First, we're gonna start with questions that come from the Patreon. So if you wanna be there and never get your question missed, join there. I'll put a link down below. So Andrew Deeb says, tips on getting bass to translate. That is the $1 million question. I have my room pretty much flat. My mixes sound balanced, including reference tracks. However, the typical question in the car, they're very bass heavy and lack mid-range. I know I hear the term translate in the car all the time, but is it fair to assume that every car sounds different? Should I be trusting my mix more and ignoring the boominess in my vehicle? One thing I have done is use headphones to double check the low end. Curious what your thoughts might be regarding so many variables. Clients seem happy, but I can't stop thinking myself do better. Thanks for everything, Jeremy. I hope one day I can meet you in person. Hey, man, I appreciate that. I hope we meet up too. So the whole thing with variables, and I just had this discussion with another engineer when we're talking live sound. I'm all about let's reduce as many variables as possible. And the car to me is just, it's a common ground. So when people talk about the car test, hopefully you're talking about your car, not someone else's car. But that's the whole thought there, is that the car is a place where you're consuming music almost more than anywhere else. For me, there's two places. My AirPods, I know those things like the back of my hand because every time I go for a jog, yeah, I'm a big boy, I jog. Or I go to the gym, yeah, that also happens too. Not enough as it should, but it happens. But I'm listening to music and videos and dialogue and all these things on AirPods. I know how it translates. Is it the number one thing you should be mixing on? No, well, that's not what mixing's for. And neither is the car, but the car is that kind of last check as far as quality control goes. In my car, I have a speaker that's broken. I know where it's going to rattle, so I can kind of check my bass and know if my speaker rattles, I'm okay. It's knowing those weird quirks of your vehicle. Now, what I will say, if you listen to a lot of music, and the music that you like in your car is not boomy, or you listen to the radio and it does not sound boomy, then there's something wrong with your mix. Trust the environment, not necessarily this process that you've created for yourself. In those situations, and you listen to like commercial music more in your car rather than in your studio, hopefully you're doing both. But I would trust wherever you have listened to more commercially successful projects. Now, that's not to say that you can't create something completely different, but if you're talking about translation across multiple spaces, that's the way I've found to do it. Obviously, there's things like tonal balance control helps a ton. Getting your monitoring right. Sound absorption that you can do in your room that helps a ton. I feel like I'm sticking on this question, but this is a big one. And getting your monitoring right. I just recently switched my monitors to Dutch & Dutch 8Cs. That's a hefty price, and if you're getting some big boy monitors, I highly recommend them. Talk to my boy Warren. I'll put his link in the description below. I don't get anything for that. Just, they're fantastic monitors if you're looking for an upgrade. Next one. Lucas. Oh, buddy, I'm gonna mess this up. Lucas Olenkido. Olenkido. Oh my gosh, I'm sorry. Really enjoyed your last video on mixing a live band. After making YouTube comment, it convinced me to join your Patreon. Mission accomplished. Hey, glad to have you. I have a modest home studio and prefer to record live, so your video hit me perfectly. I also saw your live stream session with the YouTube channel recently. I would love if you would break down how you did that, routing the audio, the video. That's a step-by-step I'd love to go down. If you guys want a really detailed thing on that, I could make a video of that. Let me know in the comments down below if that's something you want to see. But real quick, I have a few main tools that I use. The camera that I was using for that was just an Insta360, basically webcam. It's USB-C. I put it in the room wherever I want it. You can control it with the app to turn and look at things. I've been thinking about getting more of those and basically wiring the room so you can see basically every angle happening. That feeds into OBS. OBS is where everything lands, my screen grab, that camera, the audio. The audio is being routed via Source Nexus, which is a plugin that you can purchase that kind of routes everything. I kind of need a solution like that because I'm on an HDX system, which keeps your audio completely separate from your native audio card. So some of you would have a much easier time with something like Loopback, but Source Nexus is a very powerful plugin to do essentially the same thing. But yeah, I mean, not a whole lot of tricks there. But if you guys want to see a video on that, let me know. Mark Watson asks, only been here a couple months. Like Lucas, love the YouTube videos. So glad to be here. Glad to have you here. What are the top 3 things for someone building a home studio from scratch? Part of a remodel, got a single 16/18/9 framed. It'll be home office 2. I'm already planning double layers, floor, ceiling wall, but haven't started. Got a low voltage guy coming to run some XLRs, just hoping not to make dumb choices. So what are the top 3 things for somebody building a home studio? Top 3 things. I mean, I feel like the popular answer would be like some expensive interface. I'm gonna just go hard into monitoring and getting your room right. In a space, if you don't have the money to do like a real acoustic evaluation, and I didn't when I built my space. So what I did was I just killed it more than I thought I needed to. Sound deadening panels, or building your own via Ruxel and 2x4 basically boxes, then getting whatever fabrics on sale at like your local Joann's. Absolutely killing the room as far as reflections go. Making it really, really dead. And then getting the best speakers that you can possibly afford. I'm gonna toss out the Dutch and Ditches again. They're fantastic. I've now used these things in a few different rooms, and now having them in my room, I adore them. I was super worried if they would work in my space because they seem really big, but they're absolutely perfect. And I'm kind of finding that I don't even need my sub anymore because they go all the way down to 20. This sounds like a commercial. I'm not affiliated with them at all, other than they are great speakers. Warren David actually sells them, and I'll put his information down below. Don't let the sticker price scare you. Contact him, he'll get you a good price. All right, let's move to the YouTube questions. Woo! How do you feel about committing to compression and EQ on the way in when recording? I'm all in, man. If you see how I record vocals going in, I normally hit a 1084. A Neve 1084 is kind of like a 1073 with the added shelf and the preamp. It gets dirtier later in the gain stage, but that almost always goes into a distressor or another compressor like a TSL4V or both. And 90% of the time, I kid you not, I'm getting at least 14 dB of compression. That does a few things for me. Like, I already know I love it. And if I'm in a room that's pretty dead anyway, and I don't have to worry about bringing up a noise floor or bringing up other sounds around the singer, it gets me to the finished sound so much faster. And the singers appreciate it because they kind of have a finished sound as they're singing. So you get way better performances. Could you do it with a plugin? Yes, there's a little bit of a different thing there, and then you have the added thing of, are you going to tweak it later? I'm all in on trust your gut and commit early. If you're still getting to know a compressor, sure, you can back off a little bit, but don't be afraid to dig in and find the limits. Because a distressor, if you're coming from the plugin world, I could see if you were using your first hardware piece, you would be leery to push it very hard. However, that thing opens up once you get past 10 dB of compression. It just gets tasty. Russell Hill, 1981. I'm new to mixing and currently using virtual instruments, but I'd like to record actual physical ones. What would be a good starting point for connectivity to get 18 to 24 tracks of live recording on my computer? Should I just get an X32 and route it, or should I get an Apollo 18? Something like that. If I find something different, I'll put it in the description below, but if you have access to an X32, that would be the easiest way in. The other thing that I can think of is the new Focusrite stuff, like the Red 8 line or the Red 16 line. They have a stupid amount of I/O for the boxes that those do, and I think there's some Orion boxes that have the same thing. They're a little pricier. All you would really need is to find an interface that has 8 channels of XLR, and then 2 8-at ends that you could then do 2 more cheap banks of 8 XLR. Then you could get to your that would be 24 XLRs. There are super cheap options to do that. I can't think of any offhand. Post them in the comments down below if you guys have recommendations. The other thing is, you mentioned 18. In that instance, you could do a bit of a nicer interface with 1 8-at input. And then if you're typically using just 1 8-at input, sometimes they have SPDIF, and you could get those other 2 to get you to 18 via SPDIF and using something digital, like a Kemper or something else that has a SPDIF output that you could use to do like reamps or something like that. Super flexible in that situation. A lot of options. Bradzilla Soundworks says, ever had somebody come into the studio with an instrument that you'd never seen before and you had to figure out the best way to mic it? There was one really weird session where we had to mic a cat. We had to get a meow out of this thing because they wanted it for an intro of a song. Metalcore bands were weird, man. Actually, along those same lines, I had to record one of those rubber duckies that, like, when you squeeze it, it just obnoxiously, like, Wah! Yeah, that sound, please. We had to mic that for this save. It was like in a breakdown and distort it, and it was like the scream that it was the weirdest thing. I mean, I'm sure there's more examples. Those are the two that come to my mind. A cat and a rubber duck, or a rubber chicken. Chris Weiner, I have an SSL Big 6. Looks like a toy, but the headroom is plus 27 dB. Puts Trident and Onion consoles to shame. It's got tons of routing options, built-in converters. It's built like a tank and sounds great when pushed into the red zone. Do you have any experience with this toy beast? Do you recommend it or use it yourself? I've never used it myself, but man, I mean, if you've got that much headroom and you can push into it, sounds great. Go with it. Not opposed to trying one if you're listening, SSL. Travis Dolan, when using analog gear, do you print that processing instantly? Most of the time. In a mixing context, probably not immediately. A lot of my outboard gear like rarely gets changed. I'm kind of using them like plugins so that I pull them up as hardware inserts in a session and they'll just automatically be there. If I need to change something, I will, but I almost always go back to that home base and I kind of have that memorized where those are at. If I'm doing something like that's in a mix, like something on a drum in a mix context, then I print it pretty quick so that I don't lose it or forget what I did. And then in a tracking context, I mean, it all gets printed right there. So anytime you can commit to it, it just makes the job so much easier later. I've found that when I haven't worried about wanting to fix something later, that I've gotten stuff done so much quicker and I've trusted my gut and it's just come out better. Bodleboat. Oh man, these names. Do you have any thoughts on modeling microphones? Have you tried any? I haven't personally tried them. I have a good friend who has one of the Sphere microphones. I think it was previously Townsend, now it's owned by Universal Audio. He loves it. In my mind, it kind of goes back to the like committing to a sound. I almost don't want to go down that road. And then granted, I haven't tried it, so I'm not totally sure if this is how it works or not. I would be worried that that would be something that I would tweak. I would rather find the right sound in the room at that time and just commit to it wholeheartedly. I have no idea if that's what you can do with a modeling microphone, but I could see getting like option paralysis from having like 12 of those mics in a room. If I needed to mic like a drum kit or a full band with something like that, it would just I would start to be worried that it's getting redundant a little bit and like actually slowing the process down rather than picking from like a finite selection of microphones and finding tonally things that I can accentuate or subtract from a sound just from the selection of microphones here. I feel like if I had a ton of modeling microphones, you might just want to put a U47 on everything, and sometimes that's not the right answer. So, I don't know, to each their own. Ryan Jamgotch. I really love recording, production, and everything about mixing. Although one thing I've been experiencing for the past year is burnout when mixing. I don't ever want to stop mixing because I love it so much, but how do you go about dealing with burnout? Time limits. I mean, burnout's real. It is real. Even if you have like a passion for something. This YouTube thing, this is like my newest hobby, I guess. I love doing this, but holy moly, you can get burnt out on it quick. So I think approaching things delicately and giving yourself boundaries. I kind of fell in love with the process of mixing. I knew I had to address it when I would go to work, and on the way to work, I'm like, I really don't want to mix this song. When you get to positions like that, and you do have work, then I think it's time to raise your prices. Couple reasons here. If you have that amount of work and you're kind of like burdened with maybe the quality of client that you have and that's contributing to your not wanting to mix, pricing yourself out of that bracket could go a long way to help with that. The other thing is, I don't even remember what it was at this point, but there was a podcast I was listening to and it was about self-motivation and how to avoid burnout. And it was just going into the day knowing you're just absolutely going to kill it, because self-talk is enormous when it comes to stuff like this, right? And we know that. And kind of forcing yourself to think that, like, yes, I'm good at this. Yes, I want to do this. And even approaching it from kind of that, like, very surface level technique of self-talk kind of helps you in that situation of burnout. If it's in an instance where you just need to get stuff done and get it out, if you get a second to breathe and you get out of the situation you're in, maybe look at what's in front of you from a client standpoint and from a work standpoint and see if it is time to raise your prices. That'll give you more time to do other things that you might have passions for while not stretching you financially to the point of being stressed out, which can then lead to more burnout. So I don't know. Hope that helps. Eric Bader Music. What's the best way to set up a new Mac on third-party plugins and iLok? Getting a new system and want it to run smooth and to get the process done quickly. Migration Assistant? I know with Pro Tools, there's an app you can get called Plugin Assistant where it'll list out every plugin that you own. And then you can go through and install those. And most plugin manufacturers now have installers that make it super helpful. I would say do a completely fresh install. There's a few benefits you can get there, especially if there's something wrong with your system that is making it run a little odd. You're just going to migrate that over to the new system. So anytime you can do completely fresh, do it. I'm sure you can print out a list of all of your plugins and just make a checklist to go down. And you may find plugins that aren't worth migrating anyway. So it could be a way to kind of slim things down, making sure you're getting the new updated versions of everything. Everything's going to play well. And I recommend doing it that way. It's a little more work. That said, if your system's running fine, yeah, Migration Assistant. It'll get it done quick. Mason Lex Beats. How to mix a song without references. I think you can definitely mix a song without references. Or I think references come into play when there's a client who wants like a specific thing. All references are to kind of get you into the world or the mindset of who you're working with that much quicker. It's not to recreate a song. So if you have a very clear vision and an idea where you want to take something, you don't need a reference. Like, trust yourself and just go down that road. It's not like you need permission. References are there and they're tools. Just like with woodworking, you don't have to use a drill. You could use like a handheld screwdriver if you want to. Do whatever's right for the song in that instance. Lance Townsend. Is an XLR cable still just an XLR cable when you extend it to another XLR cable? Say it 5 times fast. Okay, let's go. Is an XLR cable still an XLR cable when you use it in... Bleh. Is an XLR cable still just an XLR cable when you use it and extend it to another XLR cable? Holy cow. No, I'm not. I'm going to say it just that one time. No. Little known fact in the industry, the more XLR cables that you connect, you actually start to create kind of a flux vortex around that cable. It's easy to start getting into time slippage around where that snake is that it's plugged into. So you have to be careful, because you could easily like fall into the 1800s if you're not careful. And if we go to a place where there's no electricity, there's really no way to get back. So I would definitely be cautious about how many XLRs you're putting together, because start getting into time dilation, and then you may fall in love with your grandma. Who knows? Well, who thought it would go there? Thanks for posting your questions, guys. I had a good time. Like this one if you like it. Hit subscribe if you want more like this. I'm Resident Loser Jeremy, and I'll see you in the next one.